Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I'm AJ Schweigert. I'm the Waterloo Listens Values Director. I'm going to give our intention setting, introduce our speaker, but I do want to acknowledge that Dawn Schulte found our speaker and helped to get momentum going for tonight, and she is not able to be with us due to a family loss. So I just want to acknowledge her and all the work that she is doing for Waterloo Listens and for our community. In the last 60 days, we have celebrated, honored, and drawn attention to the needs of women, children, and individuals with perceived disabilities. We're currently under an administration that disregards the basic rights of these individuals. Dystopian novels that are on banned book lists are manuals for the dismantling of liberties. It's time to ask ourselves, how much are we willing to sacrifice? Not for ourselves, but for someone else's child. For a woman whose voice has been silenced, for a person overlooked because of their perceived differences. The preservation of a free democracy requires more than conviction. It requires feet. It requires voices. It requires accountability. This is your call to action. Stay up to date on current events. Think critically. Evaluate information. Share it wisely. Seek out like-minded individuals. Build coalitions, protest, donate, write, and call. The LGBTQIA+, sorry. Also, Dawn wrote this, but I agree 100%. The LGBTQIA+ community has long been one of the most visible and vulnerable populations, and in today's climate, the scrutiny and challenges they face have become unconscionable and dangerous. The intersection between faith, particularly Christianity, and individual identity has remained a powerful and often painful point of tension. Tonight, we invite you into a space of learning, reflection, dialogue, and hope. We are honored to welcome Pastor Krissy, a compassionate voice and a courageous leader who will walk us through her personal journey and share a thoughtful religious overview of how the LGBTQIA+ community has been viewed within Christian spaces. With honesty in heart, she will explore how we can move beyond division toward healing, inclusion, and the creation of a safe, affirming spaces within faith communities. Krissy Avise-Rouse, pastor of Ephiphany UCC, was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and has lived all over the country. After careers in ad, specifically production, customer service, and software testing, Pastor Krissy attended Eden Seminary, graduating in 2006. Ordained here at St. Paul UCC, Waterloo. That July, Kris served at Immanuel UCC, Darlington, Wisconsin, and St. Paul UCC, Columbia. Krissy is a client and volunteer with Metro Trans Umbrella Group in St. Louis. Krissy is a queer elder in their 50s, married over 30 years with 2 children, a grandchild, and 2 cat children. A trans feminine genderqueer, Krissy uses they, she pronouns and goes by Pastor Krissy or PK. Following Krissy's talk, we'll host questions. As always, please keep questions and topics respectful, and please welcome Pastor Krissy.
Thank you, AJ. Okay, friends, I had a molar removed this morning, so I'm running a little low energy. Those that know me know I'm normally pretty high energy, so this will make me a little more palatable for the masses. As my bio stated, I was born in Des Moines, Iowa. What it doesn't say is I was born in a blizzard the day after Christmas, 1969. I'm going to give you sort of the short version of my story, but when I was 3, I told my parents that I was a Martian, and I stuck with that for several years. As I have come to understand myself as a neurodivergent person who is both ADHD and on the autism spectrum, it makes a lot of sense that not having words for the way I didn't fit in what was going on around me, and I was into space anyway, right? I was a science kid. Oh, I'm a Martian. That's why I don't feel like I fit. Fast forward a few years, I'm in 5th grade in Boston, Massachusetts, school in Jamaica Plain, and I'm getting in fights every other day. And the school district says, put this child in therapy or we are expelling them. So we had no money. My adopted dad, was at Boston University School of Theology, and Mom was working 2 jobs to keep us fed and the rent paid. 3 jobs? 3 jobs. Pizzeria Uno, Mississippi Sandwich Shop, and she was an alcoholism counselor at the Salvation Army Harbor Light Center. So, no money. We go down the street to the little neighborhood clinic, free clinic, and I get the guy that's just got his certificate to do counseling. And I do 9 months of individual and group counseling. And I come into his office one day and he says, I think I know what your problem is. I think you're gay. And I just laughed. And I said, you're crazy. I said, I've had a girlfriend since pre-K. I don't like hanging out with boys. I certainly don't want to kiss one. And I left and I never went back, right? I didn't go back to therapy until I was in my 40s. But fast forward again, now I'm in seminary. I've got a wife and 2 kids, and we have a class at the seminary called, so one of those big too long titles. It was Human Sexuality, Queer Theory, and Pastoral Theology. And we're in small group, and for whatever the prompt was, I told that story. And my friend Jen, who was big butch lesbian with biceps like this, she used to play semi-pro rugby and professional softball. I once saw her cut a piñata in half. Now, we didn't have a bat, they gave her a golf club, so that was tactical error number 1. But the fat Tootsie Rolls, we found one of them cut clean through. She punches me in the arm hard enough to leave a bruise, and she says, well, you dummy, he was only half wrong. And I said, Jen, what are you talking about? And she said, well, do you really think you're a boy? And I said, I don't know, Jen, what do you think I am? And Jen said, I think you're a lesbian. And I said, okay, we're going to have to talk about that. It took years of play, exploration, research, struggle to get to where I am now. Where I am now is that I am a trans-feminine, genderqueer human. And I'm going to unpack that for you. So, in the Latin, you have cis and trans. Cis means on the same side of. So anything on Rome's side of the Alps is cis-alpine. Anything on the other side of the Alps, say Germany or Gaul, that's transalpine. So with gender, cis means you're comfortable with the gender they assigned you when you were born. The thing that you didn't have any say on. Nobody asked me, are you a boy? Right? They just said, you're a boy. And that never worked for me, right? The very first name I remember being called at school was Sissy Krissy. My whole life, you throw like a girl, you cry like a girl, you're not a real boy, whatever, okay. Trans means you don't fully identify with what they assigned you when you were born. It's a big umbrella. There's a lot of categories under that umbrella. Y'all know about binary. Binary says there are only 2 choices. It's on or off, 1 or 0, male or female, right? There are people who are trans who are still tied to the binary. There are people who are trans who can't stand the binary, like me. I did not crawl, kicking and screaming and clawing and crying out of the blue box just to get stuffed into the pink box. The color's better, but it's slightly smaller and comes with more baggage. Why would I do that to myself? Okay, so trans, not cis, right? Feminine refers to my choice of presentation, right? And presentation, identity, and sexuality are all separate things. You can't tell from somebody how somebody's dressed or how they wear their hair or whether or not they have makeup or fingernail polish. You can't tell what gender they are, right? You just can't. There are people who call themselves boys who run around with pretty fingernails and eyeliner. There are people who consider themselves women who drive big rigs and dress like, I don't know, like construction workers, right? Or truck drivers, You can't tell. And you can't tell most of the time what somebody's sexuality is without asking. And why would you ask unless you're thinking about getting into bed with them? So there's that. Here's the big one, genderqueer. So the gender part's obvious, right? Queer, a lot of people have a problem with that word. It is a slur. But everything they've ever called us is a slur at some level, right? Homosexual is a slur. In fact, it was a medicalized term applied to people without their consent, right? So it doesn't matter. Everything that we've been called is a slur. The thing is, don't call somebody one of those names without their permission. Right? There are a lot of people younger than me who get really upset about the word queer. When I was growing up, it was the militant liberation term. The Gay Rights March in Boston in 1980, the chant was, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." Right? And the radical fairies and the radical queers were out front. It is part gender and sexual label, and it's part political identity. It goes right along with my rebel starbird on my tattoo. I am always going to be on the anti-imperial, pro-people side of everything, partly because I follow Jesus, and we'll get to that in a minute. There was something else I wanted to say about my story. Just know that I come from I got to stop doing that. I come from a place of incredible privilege. I have the support of my family. I have not lost my spouse or my children or the one parent I have left. My siblings are wonderful. I have a sister-in-law who picked up right away. It popped out. I hadn't planned to out myself at a family gathering, but I was being reintroduced to my nieces who at the time were 5 and 2, and my brother said, "This is Uncle Kris," and I said, "Or Auntie Krissy." It just popped out, right? And almost like a throwaway, and nobody really noticed it except my sister-in-law, Megan, who immediately started using it and teaching her daughters to use it, right? She became my favorite for a while now. So that was kind of how it happened with my family. It just kind of accidentally popped out. When I left St. Paul, Columbia, I had been pretty carefully closeted for about 10 years, serving as their youth pastor in what is still a relatively conservative suburban church, right? And so I put in my profile who and what I was, and I said, I'm not going to serve a church that's not open and affirming and not willing to call me as an out queer person. And Epiphany called me, and I'm so grateful every day because it's a wonderful congregation, and we do good ministry together. So we have Epiphany folks with us. That's why I keep looking over here. It's nice of them to come out and support me tonight. So before I go on to the religious stuff, Are there questions? Raise a hand and we can bring a mic to you. No? You want me to just plow on? All right. How many of you have seen the online thing from the concerned Monroe County pastors, or whatever they're calling themselves? A few of you? Yeah, that one. Yeah. It's awful, but read it. If you want to see what bad theology is and why I have a t-shirt that says "Bad Theology Kills," it's all right there on that page. Yes. So it's a group of the fundamentalist pastors in this county. They are having an event May 9th. Yes? It's $25 a ticket, except for kids and youth are free because they want all the kids and youth. The webpage says they want elected and appointed officials in our schools and our communities to stop allowing this dangerous ideology. Basically, I'm paraphrasing badly, but one of the things that they say repeatedly, and again I'm paraphrasing, but is that the Bible clearly says. Any of you, I see somebody laughing, you know what I'm about to say. Anybody that has studied the Bible at all, anybody that has read the Bible with any kind of intentionality will tell you there is no "the Bible clearly says" about anything. Because one of the brilliant things about the Bible is you'll have the same story told twice from 2 points of view. Chronicles tells the story from the point of view of the kings. Kings tells the same story from the point of view of the prophet. They don't match. They don't agree on anything. You have one book that ends with "kill all the foreigners, even the ones you're married to, even your kids that are half-breeds, just kill them all." And the next book starts with "treat them like they're your own brothers and sisters," because they are. I need a breath and a drink of coffee. Okay. Torah, the first 5 books of our Bible, the Jewish scriptures, recognize 8 genders: cis male and female, trans male and female, one that's kind of indeterminate, fuzzy, and might be non-binary or genderqueer, and then some other weird ones like that apply to eunuchs, and angels. Angels don't have a gender in the Jewish world. They don't. I mean, they don't look like us anyway. You know, they're wheels of fire with 100 eyes. They're flying snakes. They're messengers of light. They don't look like us. They're not pretty girls with wings and harps and robes. That's a medieval invention. There's a reason every time the angels show up, they have to say, "Don't be afraid," because they're freaking terrifying. Right? Objectively terrifying. So, if we start from a place of curiosity, and we start from a place of the Bible doesn't say any one thing clearly, what's the overarching message of Scripture? There you go. Yeah. When they asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? And they weren't just talking about the 10, they're talking about the 6,000 or so commandments in Jewish scripture and Jewish law, right? Which one's the most important? Love God and love other people. And then not just Jesus, but going back to the prophets and going back to the commandments, there are all these instructions about how to love people properly. Don't steal from them. Don't, for God's sake, don't kill them. Don't want what they have so badly you make a plan to get it. Don't break your covenantal relationships and mess around with other people. There's a story coming up this week. It's Holy Week. We got a lot of good stories this week. But there's a story coming up this week, depending on which gospel you're in, that Jesus tells the disciples to go into the city and they'll see a man carrying a water jar and they're supposed to follow him. Now, most of us don't pay any attention. We act like that's a throwaway line. Guess what? Men didn't carry water jars. That was women's work. This guy, at the very least, is breaking the rules of his culture. And it's quite possible that he was gender nonconforming, genderqueer, trans, something. Obviously, we can't apply today's terminology to people in Bible times. My Old Testament professor said the folks in the Bible couldn't be more different from us if they were from Mars. And we have to work really hard to understand the rules of their culture in order to understand the scriptures that we're reading. And especially the letters in the New Testament. We're reading somebody else's mail. It wasn't intended for us. Now, we often find we're having the same fights in our churches that they had at Corinth or at Rome or, wherever. But there are layers of culture and expectations and societal norms that we don't deal with. I'll give you an easy one. The parables of Jesus. A parable is a short, memorable story drawn from everyday life, designed to suck you in so you think you know the story, so that when the subversion, the twist comes, it can change the way you think about things. Okay? The world Jesus lived in ran on two axes. The Jewish world ran on clean and unclean. You want to be up here, you don't want to be down here. But guess what? You don't have a lot of say in where you fall on that axis in the Jewish world. If you're a woman, you're automatically unclean at least 7 days a month, right? And anytime you bear a child and certain other times, you're down there whether you like it or not, whether you've done anything to deserve it or not. The Roman world, so that's clean and unclean. The Roman world runs on honor and shame. And so if you live in Roman-occupied Palestine at the time of Jesus, you want to be up here and you don't want to be down here, and you have very little say in where you fall. So Jesus tells a story about a man with two sons. And the younger son, now they all start out up here theoretically, right? It's a good family, they have money, they're up here. But the younger son comes and he says, "Dad, I wish you were dead. I want my share of the inheritance." Whoop! He has dishonored himself and his family. He is completely shamed, right? And as soon as he leaves the country, he's now unclean. Because the thing about clean and unclean is that if you're in your place, you're clean. And if you're out of place, you're unclean. So blood inside the body's fine, but blood outside the body, automatically unclean. Hold that thought for a minute. This wasn't the parable I was going to do. Oh, well. We'll get back to that. There's another instance where we act shocked about something in a parable that Jesus' listeners, it wouldn't have bothered them at all. It's part of the story that they would have been, yeah, that's right. And that's the Samaritan parable. Because this guy's lying on the side of the road. He might be dead. He's definitely bloody. The priest and the Levite are on their way to the temple. They cannot touch this person. If they get blood on them or if he's dead, they're unclean and they can't work. And everybody hearing Jesus tell that story knows that. We act like it's a big shock that the priest and the Levite don't stop. No, the shock is that it's not an ordinary average Jew that stops and takes care of the guy, but it's this hated half-breed Samaritan, right? So back to the man with 2 sons. He's shamed and dishonored. He gets a job working with pigs, right? Which good Jewish boys don't do. It's even more unclean. Oh, and he's been messing around with prostitutes and drinking lots of wine, lots of shame, lots of uncleanliness. He decides to come home. While he's still a long way off, what happens? He doesn't just come to meet him. What does it say? He runs. Do patriarchs in the ancient world run? You got to hitch up your robe. You're wearing sandals. It's so easy to trip. Patriarchs don't run. Dishonor. What does a good Jewish father do with a son that has disobeyed and gone off and raised hell? You're dead to me, right? The only thing he can do to maintain honor and cleanliness is to shun the boy. But he doesn't do that. He runs and he hugs him. So now he's dishonored himself and he's unclean. And he calls for a big party. Now this is where the story gets complicated. Because when Big Brother comes in from the field and he says, I'm not going into that party, he's screwed. He has no way to win in this situation. If he disobeys his father by not going into the party, he shames himself and his whole family. But if he goes into the party, he's shamed and unclean. No win. And Jesus says the kingdom of God is like this. Because Jesus was what we call shameless. He strove to live outside that whole system. To say there is nobody on the inside or the outside. One of my favorite one-panel comics is by a guy who calls himself the Naked Pastor. And it's got good church people in their suits and dresses with giant pencils drawing squares on the ground. And here's Jesus with a giant eraser rubbing out the lines. Right? This is the guy that those of us who call ourselves Christians say we follow. He talked to women outside of his family, which was not done in that time and place. He touched people and let people touch him that he did not know and was not related to. Completely outside the honor and shame system. Feminist and womanist biblical scholars will tell you that in the feeding miracles, Jesus has 5,000 people and just a little bit of food. The miracle is not feeding a lot of people with a little bit of food. Every poor mama in the world does that every day. The miracle is getting 5,000 people, oh no, that's just the men, plus the women and children to sit down together. Except in Luke 8. Getting them to sit down together and eat in a culture where you were very careful about who you ate with. Right? There were rules and expectations. I was a guest on a podcast. Oh, and I'm going to recommend this. If you want to learn more about religion and queer people, Blessed Are the Binary Breakers is a marvelous podcast. I consider the host a dear friend, and I did an interview that became parts of 2 episodes But I talk about the story of Lazarus, Jesus' friend who died. And Jesus says, Lazarus, come out. And he comes out of the tomb, but he's still wrapped in the bandages. Coming out in not only this culture, but any culture, is like being Lazarus, right? You're out, but you're still wrapped up in all the crap, the expectations and the labels and the stuff that society piles on all of us without our permission, right? You have what your parents thought you were going to be, or wanted you to be, or thought you were. You have right now the government telling you what you're supposed to be. Though I love that, they accidentally made us all women. They made us all female because they said the gender or the sex at conception. Well, at conception, everybody's female. You don't turn male for several weeks. So there's that. Man, I was going someplace with this. Okay. Yeah. So you need people to help you unwrap all that crap, right? And for me, that's been the MTUG folks. It's been my networks of queer clergy around the world who communicate through the magic of the interwebs. And God, that's a wonderful thing. If we had had the internet when I was a kid, well, first of all, I probably wouldn't be married with 2 wonderful kids and a great-grandkid, right? But I would have had words much sooner for what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And probably would have known much sooner that I was autistic. So, there's that too. Found that out online, hanging out with other neurodivergent folks. It was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. There are layers and layers of hurt and trauma caused by the church, the big C church, right? I grew up United Methodist. My adopted dad is a retired Methodist minister, served in the Iowa Conference from the time I was going into 7th grade until 4 or 5 years ago when he retired. I left the Methodist Church after the General Conference in the 90s, where they physically removed legitimate voting members from the conference floor for trying to talk about the G and the L. Now, they weren't even talking about the rest of us yet, right? They were just talking about the G and the L. And at that time, I didn't think I was any of those things. I just thought, this is a really crappy way to be church, and I can't be part of this, right? I had been a member of my annual conference since junior high, and I was a member of the Missouri Conference. I was a member at Krissy Memorial United Methodist, which used to be on Morganford and is no longer there, in the Bevo neighborhood. But had served as a member of the Missouri Conference that same summer, and that conference was bad too, but not as bad as the General Conference. And I just said, this is bad for my faith. I can't do this. And I left, and I didn't go to church anywhere for like 5 years. And actually, we had bought a house here in Waterloo, and we had lost a child, and we were sitting in our empty house, and the doorbell rang. And I wasn't expecting anybody, but I answered the door, and there's this lovely couple from St. Paul United Church of Christ, and we're here to welcome you to Waterloo. And they gave me a basket, and they left. And I opened up the basket, and it was a loaf of hot, fresh, home-baked bread, and some information about the church, and some information about the town, and that great Monroe County map. Love that map. And I said, gee, this is really nice, non-threatening evangelism. And I was loved into the United Church of Christ here. Some of my hurt was addressed, but obviously not all of it. And I delivered friendship bread for the first 2 years I was a member here. So, and we did that, actually. We did the friendship bread ministry until the city stopped giving us the list of new utility turn-ons. We didn't stop because we wanted to. We stopped because we couldn't get the list anymore. So, but the recent shakeout in the United Methodist Church, where the church split, mostly over queer rights, people who were defrocked, who were kicked out for being openly gay, lesbian, trans, are going back. And I realized how deep my hurt is in my reaction to that, which was, oh my God, how could you? I couldn't go back if they had thrown me out. And maybe that says something about me, I don't know, but definitely I'm still carrying some trauma and some hurt. So here's where I stand. I've got church people, obviously not you lot, but I have church people telling me you can't be a good Christian and be queer. And I have queer people with their complex trauma from churches saying you can't be Christian and be a good queer. It's kind of like the situation we put the Japanese Americans in during World War II. You can't be a good Japanese and a good American at the same time. And we do that to people all the time. We want people in neat little boxes, right? So we can categorize them and know who's in and who's out and who's what. And my lovely spouse does not understand gender at all. So it'd be funny if it wasn't so painful for us. For several years, I would bring something up, and she would say something that sounded to me like, I don't understand your thing with gender. That's what I was hearing, right? And then one day, I heard it differently. I heard, I don't get gender. So I went online and I pulled a list of definitions of identities that are based around not understanding gender. And I stripped off the labels. I just gave her the definitions. And I said, have a look at this when you feel like it, and tell me if there's one that feels like what you feel. Well, she immediately starts reading the list, and she gets about halfway down, and she says, yes, this, right here. The concept of gender is meaningless or nonsensical to your sense of self. And she says, this is exactly how I feel. The whole thing, everybody that cares about gender, it's all nonsense to me. I don't understand what you mean when you say you feel female, you feel feminine. What does that mean? I don't understand how people, gender objects. How do you look at a car and say that's a girl? Doesn't make any sense to her. And she wishes we'd all give up all the labels and just be people, right? Which would kind of be nice. For some of us, the labels mean something, probably because of our trauma, right? So the label is like, it's an accommodation. It's like a crutch or a cane or a wheelchair or a pair of glasses. It helps you deal. So I think that's what I've got at the moment. Let's take some questions. And if I think of some other things, I'll throw them out.
Yes, thank you so much, Pastor Krissy.
Put
Please
this
sit
back
down,
where I got
relax,
it,
do
and then
what
I'll
you
go
need to
sit
do.
down in the.
And this may be one more round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Amanda, when do we need to be out of this space? Okay, just.
We're in a sanctuary. I'm a preacher. Will you pray with me? Holy One, we praise all your many names, all the ways that you have appeared to people around the world and through time, for bringing us together, for this beautiful day that you made, for this beautiful group that you have brought together this night, and for your word and the invitation to wrestle with it, to struggle with the great questions of what it means to be human, what it means to be made in your image, what it means to love one another. Go with us to our rest and beyond. We pray all things in your holy name. Amen. Thanks, friends.
Thank you so much. So I have a few announcements, and then I do want to encourage, if you all want to stay a little while and continue to connect and share things, if you want the microphone. There's not a lot of opportunity in Monroe County to do this. And I do feel like we have now created a sacred space for one another, so I want to honor that. We didn't bring any sign-up sheets tonight, but if you were interested in participating with Waterloo Listens, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, but also just email us and sign up for our email list. It's just waterloolistens@gmail.com. If you would like to volunteer with any particular events or projects. A big thing we have coming up is every June we have an anniversary party that marks the beginning of our organization informally, but this will be our 5th anniversary party at the end of June. I am in charge of planning that event, so you are also welcome to just come up to me if you would like to help. We are fun things. And so in my 20s, I began to learn a lot. College, yes, please go. Education is important for us to just learn about one another and to become more empathetic. And I began to deconstruct. But I mention this because then I was trying to figure out where to go after I left. Because I decided that bigots weren't going to take Jesus from me, that closed-minded people that believed in biblical inerrancy were not going to take Jesus from me. But where do I go? And I was kind of shopping around, and I ended up back where I started, which is Macetown UCC, which is very small. So there's not a whole lot of social justice work going on in a town of 130 people. Make it happen. And so for the last almost 5 years, Waterloo Listens has been my church because it allowed me to do the work that I felt that the divine, that God was calling me to do. So it is really important to have those churches that are outwardly open and affirming, because otherwise people are going to leave the county to go to church. And it is queer people, it is people of color, but it is also more progressive people that feel lost and don't have a faith home in the county. Because they don't, I found out about you all through Nathan, but he told me about it once and I knew that I could reach out and invite you all. And I remembered that. So it is really important, even though it is also really hard and scary, as Rufus just tasked me with trying to do it at my own church. All right, thank you all for coming. You're welcome to just mingle if the microphone is too intimidating. But yes, I really, really appreciate the turnout and everything everybody has shared.